Hey, what's going on YouTube? What's happening, guys? You guys have tuned into Rules for Rebels, and to be quite honest with you, I'm not really sure exactly what today's video is about. We're going to be talking about the shit show that is marijuana legalization here in Illinois, and more specifically Chicago. I wanted to kind of keep it on somewhat of a business front. I wanted to talk about some opportunities for you guys to potentially make some money with the legalization of weed. Probably not going to be able to do something like open up a dispensary. The way Illinois has set things up, it's nothing like California and some of the states out west. Uh, Small players aren't really going to be able to get into the game unless you got probably a $500,000 or more. There's like literally zero chance of you getting into the legal weed market in terms of like being able to set up a grow op or being able to set up a dispensary. However, a lot of times, as we've seen in California and some other states, and even from some of our Side Hustle Tuesday episodes, there's ways that you can kind of ancillarily, I don't think that's a word, but we're going to say there's some ways that you can ancillarily get into the legal weed market. Maybe you could set up a delivery service. I'm guessing in Illinois they probably wouldn't allow something like that. You could set up maybe like you know how they have these like sip and paint businesses where you go and drink wine and draw a painting and they teach you how to paint. I think one of our Side Hustle Tuesday episodes from a while back was about a place in, I think it was Colorado or California, where you could go smoke weed and take a painting class. You know, you could do something like that. Maybe you could do some type of like, probably couldn't get into like bakery stuff, but there's always ways where you can kind of make money off the surrounding industry. And I think there are going to be some opportunities to do that here in Illinois. One thing that I was thinking about doing, and I'll just kind of throw it out there because I don't know if I'm going to get around to it. Maybe some of you guys are interested, but setting up a directory. So, I mean, essentially, like Yelp is a directory, but setting up a directory specifically for weed shops. So, it could be like Chicago weed shops near me or something like that. And you would have a directory website where you would list all the shops, and then maybe you could charge shops like, you know, $100 a month, $300 a month to be listed in your directory. Maybe you could list all the weed shops for free to be able to provide some value to users and drive traffic to the site. But then if people wanted like a sponsored listing to where they could actually put their menu and stuff like that, you could charge money for that. You could potentially run ads on your site. And there's a lot of like, you know, here's just like if you're someone who's like, I'm not a web designer, how would I do this? There are WordPress themes that let you set up directory sites. So, you know, here you don't have to make it national. You could make it only Chicago or only Illinois, or if you're in Michigan, because Michigan actually just had their first day of legal weed. Of course, like you know Nevada and most of the other states, they sell out the first day. There's shortages for months. But Michigan just had theirs, so Michigan could be another state. I think now that Illinois is legalizing and Michigan's legal. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the geography of Illinois, but basically, like Chicago is on kind of the what northeast of Illinois, and then you have northwest Indiana right here. And Indiana's got a pretty small part of the state along the lakefront, so it's probably like from Chicago to cross the Michigan border is probably not much more than an hour to cross over into like New Buffalo. So think about like Indiana and anybody, if somebody's living in Northwest Indiana or anywhere around there, like they could pretty much be in Chicago in 10 to 15 minutes, or they could be in New Buffalo, Michigan in probably under a half hour. And what's it take for somebody to drive there, grab some weed, and you think like when they're ready to leave, they're going to be like, I better throw this in the garbage because it's illegal to bring back. Like, fuck no, they're not going to do that. They're going to be like, I'm going to throw it in my trunk and come back home. And so I think Indiana's probably going to legalize weed in the not too distant future. Indiana tends to be a little bit more conservative. But I mean, shit, you're right in between two states that have legal weed. Like, do you really want to miss out on the tax revenue? You got to realize that there's going to be a black market created in your state because people are going to bring legal weed back from Michigan and Chicago, and they're going to sell it in your city. So you might as well just legalize it and get the tax revenue. And that's kind of, if you notice, that's kind of what we see happening with legal weed in other areas. Like, you know, California was kind of the first one to have medical marijuana plus like regular legal weed. Actually, I think Nevada beat them to it. But you get the point. Like, once one state legalizes, it kind of just makes sense for surrounding states to legalize. And that's why, like, a lot of the legalization right now is what Oregon, Washington, California, Nevada, even in the Northeast. I don't know what states off the top of my head are legal in the Northeast, but I want to say like Massachusetts, DC is like quasi legal. I think maybe Vermont. And so there we have another pocket of states that have gone legal. And up until recently, nobody in the Midwest was legal. So now that Michigan first went legal and now Chicago, I think you're probably going to see like Wisconsin, Minnesota tends to be much more liberal. I think you'll see Minnesota go legal pretty soon. Probably Indiana as well. And then it's just going to, that effect is just going to continue to go out. So anyhow, one thing I had thought about doing is setting up like a directory website like this, Chicagoland weed shops near me, or something like that, and charging people for advertising and or for like premium listings on it. So that's an idea. There's a bunch of great directory sites out there. Even if you're not a web designer or that tech savvy, it's pretty easy to throw something like this together. You could probably hire someone on Fiverr. So there's one potential way to make money. If any of you guys are in other states that are legal and don't necessarily own like a don't necessarily have a grow op or a dispensary, but you're somehow making money off the industry, I'd love to hear suggestions, and I'm sure other people would as well in terms of like how you get into the business. Here's what's kind of, the reason I'm titling this like the shit show of legal weed in Illinois is because Illinois and Chicago specifically are incredibly corrupt. I mean, I could make a 10-hour video talking about how corrupt it is. There's a great documentary called Madigan that's about Michael Madigan, probably the biggest piece of shit in Illinois. And it's kind of all about the corruption in our state. Not only the corruption in our state, and that almost everybody's corrupt, but the entire system is set up in a way so that corruption can't go away, basically. Really interesting CNBC documentary. I'll link to it in the description box below if anybody wants to check it out. It's free on YouTube. But here's why I want to talk about the shit show of legal weed in Illinois is... So like I said, Illinois is really corrupt. The system was set up in a way to where initially when they decided they were going to make legal weed, they were like, we want to keep this attainable to like people who've been arrested for weed and small businesses and minorities, and we want this to be an attainable business for people to get into and create jobs. And what it wound up turning into was like, unless you're connected politically and have a shitload of money, you're not getting in. I actually work for a woman who has a CBD business, but she also has she also started a foundation about medical marijuana years ago, and she's actually a consultant who helps people get their weed licenses. And pretty much all the weed licenses in Chicago and the Chicagoland area, the medical ones that were rolled out initially, she was pretty much a consultant helping every one of those shops get set up. I think she was 4 for 4 or 5 for 5 in terms of the shops that she consulted with and who got licenses. And something she told me, she tells businesses when they want to hire her as a consultant, if you want to work with me and if you want to get into this business, do you have $150,000 that you can just throw in the garbage right now? Like, we're not talking about build outs, inventory, marketing. Do you have 150 grand that you can just throw in the trash? And if they say no, she'll tell them, it's not even worth our time because that's basically what it's going to take to get the licenses. Now, whether that means paying bribes or donations or God knows what else, or whether the licensing is just that expensive, that just kind of gives you an idea of the barrier to entry and getting into the weed market here in Illinois. Also, the way they set up the law, they don't allow home grow, so it's still illegal to grow marijuana in your home. I think that's kind of stupid. I don't know. That's just me. I'm sure people will be growing anyway. I think that's kind of dumb. I hear a lot of people say, well, the companies and the people who are getting these licenses, they don't want people to be able to grow their own weed at home. But I mean, here's the reality, guys. Most people are fucking lazy. They don't want to learn a new skill. Like, people could bake bread at home, but how many people are baking fresh bread at home as opposed to just going out and buying bread? You can brew beer or brew wine at home or even distill liquor at home. How many people are actually doing that as opposed to just buying it at the store? Like, you're not going to have like floods of people who are deciding to grow weed at home. Like, a few hobbyists will probably do it, but it's not going to make a dent in the industry at all. So I thought that was kind of a stupid rule. Hopefully that kind of goes away at some point. Really expensive to get involved. Like I said, I know initially when they first rolled this out, they were like, we want people with marijuana arrests who have been affected by the drug war to be able to get licenses, but then you need to have a clean criminal record to be able to get a license. So I'm not sure if that's like they want people to bring on employees or partners who maybe don't have a clean record. I had a felony arrest for weed back in college. Didn't wind up getting charged with the felony ultimately. But that should be like a leg up for me, an extra point for me if I wanted to try to get into the system. And I'm not sure like exactly what the whole criminal record part has to do with it. But I figured we kind of read through this Illinois weed legalization guide. Here's another kind of piece of bullshit about this. So there's this alderman in the West Loop And West Loop Alderman's message to weed dispensary owners: get a black partner or don't come to my ward. So this guy's an alderman in the West Loop. His name's Burnett. What's his name? Alderman Walter Burnett. This guy is incredibly corrupt as well. Pretty much every alderman in Chicago is. Every politician in Chicago and Illinois is. But he's basically saying, like, he's upset that none of the marijuana licenses have gone to African Americans. So he's saying, get a black partner or you're not going to be allowed to open a dispensary in my ward. Now, really, who the fuck is he to say, first off, this is clearly racist. Like, I know some people will make the argument, like, oh, well, black people have been negatively affected by the drug war and this, that, and the other, so they should, have presidents to get a license. There was nothing stopping black people from getting weed licenses. I don't know if they didn't want to get involved in the business or, but there was nothing like racist in terms of how licenses were handed out. And what I would be curious to know is how many black people applied for licenses. If zero applied for licenses, you can't really be upset that no black people got licenses. But to me, this just seems incredibly racist, and it seems like, who the fuck is he to say, like, what if a Hispanic alderman, like, I think that Chewy guy's already in prison, but what if a Hispanic alderman was like, unless you have a Hispanic partner, don't come to my ward? I'm sure this guy and black people would be upset about that. But nobody really seems to be getting that upset that this guy's saying, unless you have a black partner, you're not welcome to open up a business. If I lived in the West Loop, I would be pretty pissed off. I want the business who's best prepared to serve the customers and who's going to run the most, straight up business. I would want them to open up a shop in my neighborhood so that there's a good business running where I can get a good selection of products at decent prices. I don't want somebody getting a license or opening up a dispensary just because of the color of their skin, whether they're black, white, yellow, Hispanic, anything. So I thought this was kind of fucked up. Let's take a look at the Illinois Weed Legalization Guide. The Illinois General Assembly passed HB 1438, legalizing recreational marijuana use and sale in the state for adults on May 31st, 2019. Governor Pritzker signed the bill into law on June 25th, and that makes Illinois the 11th state to legalize marijuana. I was actually kind of surprised. I thought we'd be one of the last states, although if there's some way for politicians to get their grubby hands on some money, they're going to do it. So I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. Just some kind of general facts. When will marijuana be illegal in Illinois? January 1st, 2020. So that's less than a month away. Who will be able to purchase marijuana legally? Adults age 21 and over. How much marijuana can be legally purchased or possessed? Up to 30 grams or about 1 ounce of marijuana plant material. Edibles totaling no more than 500 milligrams of THC. So let's see, most THC like gummies and stuff are about 10 milligrams. You get 10 per tube or per jar or whatever. So that would be, 5 jars? That's actually kind of light. And 5 grams of cannabis concentrates. Residents will be able to purchase, non-residents will be able to purchase half those amounts. How will marijuana be taxed? There's a graduated tax set up for recreational marijuana in Illinois. Marijuana and cannabis-infused products with less than 35% THC will be taxed at 10% of the purchase price. Cannabis-infused products with more than 35% THC will be taxed at 20% of the purchase price. And marijuana with more than 35% THC will be taxed at 25% of the purchase price. Now, if anybody's wondering, like, what's the benefit to getting a medical marijuana card, a buddy of mine has his medical marijuana card, and I believe they just pay the normal tax. So basically the same tax you pay for groceries. Otherwise, I think currently for medical, otherwise I thought it was going to be 40%. Maybe it's only 35%. But then cities are going to tack on like another 10%. So you're going to be paying about a 45% tax. So the benefit to getting even though it's legal, the benefit to getting a medical marijuana card is they won't be able to charge you all the taxes. Medical marijuana is exempted from these taxes, like I just said. One other thing though, my buddy who's got his legal weed card, he's got a FOID card. But when he went to actually go buy a gun, they have to send it into the Illinois State Police to do a background check before you buy a gun. The Illinois State Police actually called him up and was like, sorry, you can't buy a gun, you got a weed card. So he could go on like Arms List or something like that and buy a gun legally off a stranger in a parking lot. Arms List is like a site like Craigslist, but he can't go into a gun shop because gun shops are FFL, Federal Firearm License, and marijuana is still illegal federally. Let's see. Medical marijuana. Oh, individual municipalities can also levy additional taxes on recreational marijuana if they choose to, in a 0.25% increments not exceeding 3.75% in unincorporated areas, and 0.75% in municipality located in a non-home rural county, and 3% in municipalities located in home rural counties. Can I grow my own marijuana? Only medical marijuana patients will be able to grow plants at home. They are limited to 5 plants. So if you want to grow weed, you still got to get the license. Will I be able to smoke wherever I want? No, you will not be able to smoke marijuana in public legally. Consumption in private areas will be legal. Local jurisdictions will be able to decide for themselves if they allow dispensaries to let people smoke on site. Um, that's one other interesting thing. A lot of cities recently have been voting like we don't want to allow dispensaries in our city or our county. I think it's kind of stupid if they decide not to. If you allow liquor stores in your county or your city, you might as well allow weed dispensaries. Weed dispensaries are a lot more locked down than liquor stores. Like a kid can walk down to the corner liquor store and go in there to buy a soda or a Gatorade or candy, and theoretically could steal some liquor. Nobody's even going to be allowed inside of a marijuana dispensary without showing ID. So like, there's no chance of like a 10-year-old walking into a weed dispensary, but 10-year-olds can walk into a liquor store to get candy. So I think it's kind of silly. Most of the marijuana shops I've seen have been pretty like high end too. It's not like it's a bunch of like Rasta colors and hippies. Like they're actually very high end, like Apple stores or whatever. Who will be selling marijuana on January 1st? Existing medical marijuana cultivators and dispensaries will begin selling to adults until new licenses are approved per the law. The state will begin receiving and processing new licenses on March 15th, 2020, and new dispensary licenses will be issued starting on May 1st, 2020. Another round of licenses will not be issued until after the state completes a disparity and market study on the industry. The second round of licenses must take into account the study's findings. Let's see, what about people in jail for marijuana? The law allows people convicted of possession of under 30 grams prior to legalization to have their records referred to the Prisoner Review Board and Governor Pritzker for pardon. If the pardon is granted, the Illinois Attorney General will remove and expunge their records. Those convicted of possession of larger amounts can petition for expungement themselves. Local states' attorneys can pursue expungements on a case-by-case basis. Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox, she is the corrupt one, speaking of corruption in Illinois, the corrupt one who got Jussie Smollett off in that fake hate crime thing that went on here that I'm sure everybody has heard about. Her office will expunge all misdemeanor marijuana convictions once it becomes legal. She also said the state's attorney's office is currently looking at a policy on prosecuting people who have been detained for selling marijuana once it becomes legal in the state. So it looks like that's kind of the full article. I think it's kind of funny, or it's actually not funny. It's actually kind of sad. But it's kind of ironic that we have people sitting in jail, nonviolent people sitting in jail for marijuana, and all of a sudden this is going to be an industry that politicians are going to be at the shop shopping, large legitimate corporations are going to be involved, but at the same time, somebody a month earlier who was doing the same thing is sitting in prison for it. It just seems kind of fucked up. Thought this was an interesting article as well. This one actually has to do with Michigan and Wisconsin, but the article is titled "With Weed Legalization in Neighboring States, Wisconsin Employers Are Rethinking Marijuana Policy," and it kind of talks about what I was all talking about earlier, which is like once one state goes legal, it kind of affects surrounding states because somebody can drive 15 minutes across the border and buy weed. And what they're kind of saying here is, Michigan and Wisconsin are pretty close together, at least the Upper Peninsula. Or people can go up on the Upper Peninsula and back down into northern Michigan. But they basically have some employers here saying, if I drug test, I'm a whatever kind of shop and I drug test, and one of my competitors' shops is right down the street and they don't drug test, he's like, I'm missing out on skilled people who would be great employees, but I can't hire them just because I drug test, whereas the guy down the street is able to bring in all the talent. And if it's not a job where you're operating heavy machinery or something like that, who really cares if somebody smokes weed? Obviously, we don't want people intoxicated at work, but alcohol is legal, and how many people are going into work drunk. Like, obviously, are there some people? Yeah, but those people would be going into work drunk whether alcohol was illegal or not. So this just kind of touched on how the Midwest kind of going legal is kind of causing some employers to rethink their policies, their internal company policies on marijuana use and drug testing. And I thought that was kind of interesting. We've done a couple other articles, stories, videos about marijuana legalization. I think New York State actually made it illegal to drug test for marijuana. So you can still drug test for opiates, for amphetamines, but you can't, it's illegal to drug test for marijuana. And I believe that even goes for people who are on probation. You can't drug test people on probation or parole for marijuana either. And we're starting to see those types of policies roll out in other states as well. So, like I said, this video was kind of all over the place. This is kind of coming to my hometown, so to speak, my backyard. So I thought it was kind of an interesting story. It's less than 30 days away. Anytime a new industry rolls out, with marijuana is kind of a new legal industry at least, there's opportunities to make money. Like I said, in Illinois, you're likely not going to be able to grow or set up a dispensary, but there might be some way for you to set up a business in the surrounding space and profit off this new legalization. One idea I gave you guys was potentially setting up like a directory website and either charging advertising or figuring out some other way to monetize it. Even if you're not in Illinois, that could be pretty lucrative. If you guys are in Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, etc., there might be some way for you to kind of get involved in this industry. Anything else you guys have to add about this? If any of you guys operate businesses in the weed space or surrounding the weed space, I'd love to hear more about it. I'm sure other people would as well, so go ahead and drop a comment in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button below, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.